Tonight on Chronicle, a sport born of speed and moonshine.
Racing came about a whole lot from the bootleggers.
From the dirt tracks of the Carolinas.
There was a lot of racing in the Carolinas, and that's what made it grow.
All of the fast cars and fast drivers came from the Carolinas.
To one of America's biggest spectator sports.
You quickly understand that that's where the heart of our sport is.
The racing legends.
It was just a hotbed of racing.
And the future of the sport.
Racing is Carolinas, and the Carolinas are racing.
Tonight on Chronicle, racing in the Carolinas.
Good evening and welcome to Chronicle. I'm Jane Robelo here at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. This track is home to NASCAR's All-Star race and its longest race of the season. Last year alone, NASCAR pulled in an estimated 5.3 million television viewers per event. NASCAR is a multi-billion-dollar spectator sport, but it hasn't always been that way. NASCAR held its first strictly stock series race in 1949 here in Charlotte. And in 1950, NASCAR's first super speedway opened at Darlington International Raceway. But racing cars and the need for speed go back even further in the Carolinas. To begin our story, here's Brad Freilich.
The heart of racing beats here.
You know, when I started racing, there wasn't no paved race tracks or nothing like that.
In the 1940s, moonshiners began organizing races on dirt with souped-up cars they used to run from the law.
I never did think anybody could outrun me driving.
Junior Johnson roars down the pit road.
Nobody had any experience. Junior Johnson didn't have any experience. Lee Petty didn't have any experience in the race car.
The competition of building cars and motors and stuff like that really took a hold of me.
From bootlegging to stock car racing, the biggest names in the sport call the Carolinas home.
But it's a great story. We all know about the moonshining days and where the fast drivers came from.
The king himself,
He gives me a hard time.
grew up in Level Cross, North Carolina.
It was a very country setting and still pretty much that way.
His childhood home and the racing shop where he was raised is a shrine to racing history.
The better people I run against, like the Pearsons and Allisons, Yarboroughs, they brought the best out and I was just a driver.
A short drive south on I-85 brings us to another hotbed for NASCAR history here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Names like David Pearson, Cotton Owens, and Bud Moore.
Bud and Cotton both. Cotton won a lot of races. Cotton was a good race car driver. And Bud, of course, he was a good mechanic and crew chief and had a lot of drivers drive for him.
On the backstretch, Pearson catches Yarborough.
Pearson may be the most famous from the Hub City. He is number 2 all-time in wins behind Richard Petty. And Pearson got his start, like so many others, on the short tracks of the Carolinas.
Well, Greenville-Pickens was a good place to run. It was a half a mile, and we ran the races over there quite often.
And the green flag is flying.
Greenville-Pickens Speedway is still a big part of the racing circuit today.
We have a lot of young, very talented drivers that get to earn their stripes in that series.
If you want to be a country music singer, you go to Nashville. If you want to be a NASCAR driver, you better come to North Carolina.
NASCAR's pulse has worldwide reach, but the heartbeat of racing has been and continues to be in the Carolinas.
Every sport has its iconic figures. Babe Ruth, Arnold Palmer, Michael Jordan. Athletes whose popularity transcends their sport. And in stock car racing, one of those legends is a man known simply as the King. Mark Dofer went just a few miles up I-77 from here to the town of Mooresville to talk with Richard Petty about a life that's had more than its fair share of triumph and tragedy.
The car of tomorrow, a reminder of yesterday. That powder blue, fronted by 43.
I've seen you on TV.
The man who continues to be its caretaker is the man who drove it to immortality.
I just love to drive that race car. Just love to be in it.
3 decades after Richard Petty's last ride, the King enjoys being the boss, continuing to build a legacy that began when NASCAR was born.
Racing gives us the opportunity to go all over the world. It's still nothing like home, so that's the best place in the world.
Mooresville is home to Richard Petty Motorsports, but not its birthplace. The roots of the Petty dynasty run 70 years deep and began 70 miles away in Level Cross, North Carolina.
That was where I was born. I was born in that house. The shop, it was right in the back.
Far from the roar of the racetrack in air rarely affected by burnt rubber and gasoline, a simple country home, the birthplace of racing royalty.
My dad ran the very first cup race in 1949 in Charlotte. So we've been around racing all our time, all our life. And, you know, I used to go to school. I played football, baseball, basketball. I come home and work on a race car. All my neighbors and stuff, they come home and milk cows or plow the fields.
Not Richard Petty. Before he was the king, he was a mechanic, helping his father Lee scratch out a living.
We lived off what Daddy won at the racetrack. I was working on a race car and was satisfied, tickled to death to work on the race car till I got about 18 years old and decided I think I want to be a driver.
No driver would lead more laps. No driver would spend more time in victory lane. 200 wins in 34 seasons. Petty was a young man in NASCAR's infancy. When he retired, he was a grandfather.
The Pettys are the first family in American motorsports to count 4 generations as race car drivers. It's that 4th generation where Richard Petty's story goes from triumph to tragedy. In 2000, his 19-year-old grandson Adam was killed in a racing accident in New Hampshire.
I think he would have been a super race car driver from the standpoint of what he'd already done and the attitude and stuff that he had. But the good thing that came out of his death was the Victory Junction.
This is Adam Petty's legacy. A camp for seriously ill children. When the Pettys see the campers smile, they say they see Adam.
That makes you feel good that all the time you've been in that race car and done all your thing there, it gives you the opportunity to be able to draw attention to the camp and to Adam and to the Chronicle and seriously little kids who go there.
These kids may never see a NASCAR race, and they don't need to experience the past and the future of the man behind the glasses. Number 43, the man racing still calls the king.
To put Richard Petty's 200 NASCAR victories into perspective, consider this. Spartanburg's David Pearson and current driver Jeff Gordon ranked 2nd and 3rd on the all-time wins list. Richard Petty's 200 victories are more than Pearson and Gordon's wins combined.
When Chronicle continues.
I remember the fights in the infield.
The small track connection for a big-time sport.
I learned a lesson that you ain't gonna catch me no more.
And how Junior Johnson's past made him a racing legend.
Before Richard Petty, David Pearson, and Dale Earnhardt Sr. became legends on the NASCAR circuit, they were busy making their names on the smaller tracks around the Carolinas. Tracks like the Greenville-Pickens Speedway. Ricardo LeCompte now maps out the connection of those small racetracks to NASCAR.
I physically wanted to get my hands dirty.
A hobby, or in Ron Harkin's case, an outlet.
It's my therapy.
The Easley resident toils and tinkers with these beauties.
This is a '64 Chevrolet Corvette.
The passion under the hood started at a young age.
I'm 10 years old and very impressionable, and 2 uncles bought 2 new Corvette Stingrays, and I've had the bug ever since.
And the fever boiled over at Greenville-Pickens Speedway. Small track racing close to home.
Just a little guardrail and some red dirt, you know, in our community would usually draw a pretty good crowd.
Harkins attended races here as a young fan. He even made friends with the kid whose dad raced regularly at the track.
When I was 10 and he was 12, we were throwing the baseball. By the time I was 12 and he was 14, Dale, you could tell, took an active part in his father's racing weekend.
Harkins' buddy jumped right into the pits to help out his dad, Ralph Earnhardt.
The year that Ralph Earnhardt won the track championship at Greenville-Pickens, Dale was already beginning his NASCAR plans.
Dale Earnhardt began driving at 15 years old. He went on to win 76 races and 7 championships on the NASCAR Cup circuit. The Intimidator never raced here at Greenville-Pickens Speedway during its time on the NASCAR Cup circuit, but he still made special guest appearances here annually signing autographs for fans. Other drivers like Earnhardt hone an appreciation for historic small tracks like Greenville Pickens Speedway.
Went down there first few times, and like I say, it was dirt. We done pretty good. I remember the fights in the infield.
I remember going there the first time, I was like, wow, this place it's flat. You run right up against the inside wall, and this place is cool.
NASCAR ran the Grand National Series at these venues from the 50s to early 70s, and the first NASCAR race to be televised live from start to finish came at Greenville Pickens Speedway in 1971. NASCAR eventually moved its major races away from these tracks in the early 70s. Today, come on! And the lazy green is out. The K&N and Whelen Series call these speedways home.
Congratulations, Brad Burns, your winner in the Renegade tonight.
This was their closest track and their most prestigious track.
Harkins knows he met one of the best to ever race, all thanks to a hobby started in his garage.
It's no coincidence that in the early days, the fastest race car drivers were from right here in the Carolinas. And some of those early drivers learned how to drive by running moonshine in the middle of the night through the back roads of the Carolinas and Georgia. So like it or not, the roots of NASCAR are soaked to the tips in moonshine whiskey. Here again is Brad Freilich.
In the mountains of North Carolina, long before there were super speedways, there was a need to drive fast.
Well, it was in the bootlegging business.
Hauling liquor by moonlight gave rise to fast cars.
Revenues would work with the highway patrol to try to catch you, and then they'd take it over and put you into prison.
Bootleggers learned to drive on these roads long before they were paved, running moonshine under the moonlight. They drove fast because they had to. Many of the earliest drivers here at North Wilkesboro Speedway were bootleggers. The best was Junior Johnson.
North Wilkesboro was one of the first race tracks that was ever paved because the whiskey people had enough money to pave the track.
Making moonshine and running from the law was a way of life.
I just did a common business in the whiskey business, just like you do it in a grocery store.
A common business that landed Johnson in prison.
My dad had a still back over in the woods from where he lived, and he asked me if I would go in and fire it up, and I said, yeah, I'll go fire it up for you. Stuck a shovel in the box to get a shovel of coke to put in the burner. And I heard something behind me, and I looked around. There's an officer standing up on the top of one of the 4x4 boxes, just fixing to jump on my back. I give him that shovel, and I took off. There was an opening in the fence down there, and I missed that opening. And I got tangled up in that barbed wire fence, and they caught me. Gave me 2 years in Chillicothe, Ohio. I did 11 months and 3 days. I learned a lesson that you ain't gonna catch me no more.
Junior Johnson roars down the pit road.
Johnson turned his focus to racing and became one of the greatest drivers and owners of all time.
When it goes through that coil, it cools down.
Today, Johnson is 85 years old.
It'll start off probably 200 proof.
And one of his stills sits in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Moonshine is still a family business.
I did not get out of the liquor business. It made me mad. I just got bigger.
Junior Johnson's Midnight Moon, the Johnson family legendary recipe, and from it a sport born from hard liquor and hard time.
When Chronicle continues.
Spartanburg is one of those cities that is key to the sport.
On the backstretch, Pearson catches Yarborough.
The racing legacy of the Hub City.
NASCAR may be headquartered in Daytona and its Hall of Fame in Charlotte, but its history was forged in places like Rockingham, North Wilkesboro, and Spartanburg, a place where stock car racing roots run deep and continue to thrive thanks to a racing team located just off I-85. Mark Dofer takes us to a place where you can pull up a chair and talk racing.
But I enjoy the food.
For 60 years, they've served their meat and three with a side of sass.
I enjoy these mean waitresses too. I love a woman that talk noise to me.
Places like this serve home cooking to the Carolinas.
But you know, the only thing that hadn't changed in racing in the last 50 years
Spartanburg's Peach Blossom Diner serves home cooking
is the green flag and the checkered flag. And if you don't watch, they may change that.
to Hall of Famers.
They'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
Often blended into the lunch crowd, men that grew stock car racing in their own backyard.
So we had a bunch of T models. We'd cut the body off a couple of them.
Well, we come by here most of the time to get Bud to pay.
Rooted in the city's past, future NASCAR Hall of Famers.
Bud Moore, Thompson's mechanic, watches as Thompson pounds out the miles.
Bud Moore emerged as one of the sport's most successful owners.
There was a lot of race car drivers in Spartanburg at one time.
Rex White, Cotton Owens, and David Pearson drove their way into the Hall of Fame.
On the backstretch, Pearson catches Yarborough.
Pearson's 105 wins still rank second all time.
You know, originally Talladega was going to be built here in Spartanburg.
Shortly after the completion of Daytona International Speedway, NASCAR founder Big Bill France was looking for a spot for NASCAR's next great cathedral. That search led him here, to Spartanburg's downtown airport, a 500-acre plot of land situated between two major highways. France offered to relocate and rebuild this airport. The local government turned him down. Ultimately, that super speedway was built at Talladega, altering the landscape of NASCAR forever.
Well, there was a lot of people disgusted over it because they didn't get the speedway and they knew what it would have been for business is concerned. And it's like right now there's 40 or 50 race teams in Charlotte over there and all this. Just figure if the thing would have been here.
Instead of becoming stock car racing's capital city, Spartanburg dwindled into a NASCAR outpost. Today, only one Sprint Cup team calls the hub city home.
You know, we go to lunch and we'll see Bud Moore sitting there at the Peach Blossom, and you know that's pretty special to see all the history and everything that they've got going on there in Spartanburg, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
Harry Scott purchased Phoenix Racing in 2013. He could have moved the team, instead he expanded it. Spartanburg-based H. Scott Motorsports runs two cars in NASCAR's top tier, fronted by the 51 of Justin Allgaier.
Spartanburg is one of those cities that is key to the sport. I mean, it really was one of the stepping stones to what NASCAR has become today.
In the early days of NASCAR, the hub of stock car racing was the hub city.
Field at an average speed of 106 miles an hour. A new record.
Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Owens Pontiac wins it.
Owner Harry Scott admits that it does cost more money to keep his team in Spartanburg. His racing team has to transport people and parts to and from Charlotte every day. But Scott says there's one big advantage to racing out of Spartanburg. His team has fewer distractions. All of their time and attention are focused on building H. Scott Motorsports into a national brand.
A trip to the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
To know where you're going to go, you have to see where you've been.
When we come back to Chronicle.
The NASCAR Hall of Fame here in Charlotte welcomed its newest members recently, the 5-person class recognized for their significant contributions to the sport. And the next generation of racers hope to one day join these hallowed halls. Meanwhile, NASCAR continues to evolve with the times. Ricardo Lecomte now on the future of the sport.
1, and go! In order for a sport to move forward and grow, it first has to understand its past. And NASCAR has a place to teach those history lessons.
To know where you're going to go, you have to see where you've been. We started this last year.
Buzz McKim holds class here daily.
This tire with all the confetti on it came from Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s win at Martinsville.
McKim works as a historian at the NASCAR Hall of Fame.
And King Richard, of course, he was the best.
Folks who become fans now can relive the history and find out where the sport came from, and the old-time fans can go back here and reminisce.
The NASCAR Hall of Fame opened its doors in downtown Charlotte in 2010, and as you stroll up Glory Road, you can see the evolution of NASCAR on the track, from some of the early models that Hall of Famers ran in to even the car of tomorrow. Now, NASCAR is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but what does tomorrow hold for the sports?
We're changing generations. The old guys are still race fans and all that stuff. But how do we get the new fans interested in a 4-hour show? There's still so much interest in automobiles and so much interest in NASCAR, and still a lot of spectators come.
NASCAR icons echo this sentiment. Don't forget your roots.
We preserve the history of the sport, and then we also have up-to-date items too. It's something for everyone.
The Hall of Fame will make sure NASCAR's past and present stay relevant in the future.
From dirt tracks and bootleg whiskey to technology and innovation, NASCAR has a legacy in the Carolinas that goes way beyond the checkered flag. Daytona Beach may claim the birthplace of speed, but the heart of stock car racing is right here at home in the Carolinas. And with NASCAR fans literally spanning the globe, there is no chance that this sport is going to slow down anytime soon. Thank you for joining us for Chronicle, Racing in the Carolinas. I'm Jane Robelo. Good night.